Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning, Michael.
I think I was giving our producer a little bit of heartache there this morning. Yes, we have a producer in the background. We're not going to name any names about who that could possibly be.
It may or may not be someone stuck in bed after a surgery. So if you see some crazy things go on the screen, you know we're in a post-surgery mindset. No.
Yeah, that's right.
We are very glad to have our producer, Jay White, as Michael would say.
Right.
At least half back to us. She's behind the scenes. So if you want to make a comment and wish Jenni White well in her recovery, she will see that today.
Hey, I was thinking, Katie, after Jenni gets all healed up, there now these fires that come down her driveway with a new knee, they literally don't have a chance against Jenni with her new knee as these new fires are going to be coming in over the next couple years.
It's true. I'm pretty sure she could beat a tornado with her new knee. I don't think anything's going to get the farm this time.
That's funny.
She'll be our bionic Jay White when she comes back.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, we're really glad that she did so well during the surgery, and her spirits are very good if you could see her in person, but she will be back very, very soon. But today, there are some crazy things happening, some revelations in health and wellness in our country. Michael, what did you think of Trump's press conference this week?
Well, I mean, I was pretty bummed. Yeah, they want to publicly say, you know what, we all know. I mean, yeah, you shouldn't be taking Tylenol, especially if you're pregnant. I mean, I think that they've said that. Tylenol themselves have said that. That's probably one of their disclaimers. I mean, he did mention the vaccine schedule, the amount, maybe spreading things out. But I mean, I want to hear, that they are going to go 100% on finding out, just how dangerous, testing against actual groups of people like the Amish. Trump mentioned the Amish, actually testing, non-vaccinated versus vaccinated, which is the test that they will not do. They'll, and I just want to see some actual accountability. I mean, I would like to see them come out like yesterday. And I mean, RFK has said this multiple times. The very first thing I want to see him repeal the protections for the drug companies that they get on all these vaccines.
You're correct.
I want to see him just come out and say, you know what, we're gonna repeal all the liability protections that were put in with I think it was 86 or whenever it was.
Yes, Reagan signed something in the 80s that gave them immunity when things went onto the childhood vaccine schedule, but then they also enhanced that with the PrEP Act. So the PrEP Act, I believe, was 2005. And it said if we're under some sort of an emergency authorization or we've declared an emergency, they can also, there's no way for a user of those products, forced or otherwise, to have any way to claim any kind of damage from those vaccines. So they not only did they do that to us in the 80s, they doubled down with the PrEP Act. So
and they got their secret court. They got their secret vaccine court. If you just happen to be so totally damaged, then that you get a chance to go there. But then that's all limited to my biggest deal about yesterday. Okay, putting it off on Tylenol, kind of being the scapegoat. Okay, Tylenol's been around acetaminophen's been around for a long, long time. Okay. Mm-hmm. And autism is just exploding over the last 10 years. And I mean, absolutely exploding. That's not just Tylenol, that is changes in the vaccine schedule, the amount of chemicals going into these kids, the chemical assault in our food and water system, and even in the air in probably some capacity, all the electromagnetic waves and stuff like that. I mean, it's a combination, but just to say it's Tylenol, you better quit taking Tylenol. That's ridiculous.
Well, I'm really glad that we're talking about this today. And I think you're going to be kind of surprised at some of the information because it's funny. There's a man's perspective and a women's perspective here. If you've been pregnant within the last literally 35 years, maybe 40, you know that not only is Tylenol not labeled as unsafe for pregnant women, it was the one and only go-to that your OBGYN gave you when you were pregnant. Don't take any of those NSAIDs. You can only take Tylenol if you have a headache, if you have a fever, if you have that. So they absolutely told us all, myself included, that Tylenol was the go-to. And they have been doing that up until today. That's the only thing you can take, pregnant women. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about the timing of it, because you bring up what a lot of people are struggling with is how did, oh, and you know what? Can we turn off the music, producer? There it is. Thanks. But I want to go back, because what I thought about Monday, the first thing I thought was, this is not Joe Biden's White House anymore.
Yeah.
We are talking out loud about some things that have been shrouded, buried under a rock, in a very manipulative way for decades. And as soon as this new administration came in, Robert F. Kennedy is the person that so many people have been watching. And I ended up writing an article that published in May, and I'm going to share it with you. And we never had a chance to really talk about it on your program, but it sort of brought it back to the Oklahoma level and looked at what was happening, what we might expect from Robert Kennedy, given those who don't know, he had the Children's Health Defense website and organization for decades and has been fighting against exactly what you said, Michael. The way he describes it in his books is the toxic soup that our kids have been swimming in, between what he believes are vaccines, pharmaceuticals, environmental factors, food, a list of things. So following that closely, and then him stepping into the role as secretary there at the NIH, at Health and Human Services, I wrote this article about the data that came out in April of this year. And it revealed, it was CDC data, and it revealed in an even more shocking way where we were going with autism. So this chart within the article identifies from, you can go way back to the bottom here, and that it starts, if you can't see, at 1970s when it was 1 in 10,000. And where we start to see this explosion around 1990, and it just goes up until 2025, where we're at 1 in 31 children, which is just incredibly shocking. And Lisa has a comment here I want to get to real quick. The autism rate went up in direct correlation to the 1986 law signed by Reagan that we just talked about. I've been hollering this from the rooftops for nearly 35 years. This is vaccine injury. They widened the net for autism and removed Asperger's syndrome from the DSM in favor of homogenizing them together. Really interesting thoughts there. That is what everyone is struggling with. How much of this, the side that would seek to sort of protect themselves is saying they widened the net, we're getting more kids being diagnosed with this, we have better screening, that's where it's all coming from. If that were the case, this wouldn't just have to do with an age frame. And President Trump made a really good point. Actually, it was Robert Kennedy who made the point. Do you know anybody over 55 that's severely autistic? And when we say that, no, in my life, I was sharing earlier that we have a profoundly autistic little boy in our family. But we don't have anyone who's my age or older that is autistic. In fact, it's much more prevalent with these smaller kids when you look at this chart. So there's some things to think about there. So RFK immediately upon becoming HHS secretary said that they're going to do a broad scientific inquiry. We're going to get to the bottom of this. And he called them relentless increases, and that this was epidemic denial. And the quote that really speaks to what Lisa's saying, this is preventable disease, he said. It has to be. Genes do not cause epidemics. They can provide a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. And no one has been willing to talk about this. So in the article, there are some videos of him. But what I wanted to go to here is in Oklahoma. Let's look at Oklahoma, where we live. And according to that source of that data that came out in April, Oklahoma has had a 221% increase in the rate of autism just from 2007 to 2022. So here, this data here on this chart, and let me make it as big as I can make it so you can really see, okay? So this data on this chart is looking at from 2007 to 2022, just in Oklahoma, and it's cases per 1,000. And yes, it went up all over the country, but Oklahoma has one of the highest rates of childhood autism. We are 1 in 25 kids. And if we look a little closer at it, we can go back and see. So this was in 2007, the prevalence of autism. When they started tracking some of these things, already Oklahoma popped up on the map. We were one of the hot spots. And then if you go to 2021, where this data is, we are in dark blue, which is the highest prevalence of cases. How much have you heard from our state government, from our health department, or our Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse on this topic, Michael?
Oh, I've heard them just bang the walls down, Katy. I mean, give me a break. And since we're going to talk about your article, I went ahead and took the liberty of downloading the VAERS database, and I got the total number of vaccine events. Plus, I went ahead and sorted it by Oklahoma and separated out Oklahoma on top of it.
Oh, yeah, we need to look at that. You just tell me wherever you think that fits. That's incredible information. So further on in this article, we start to look at, and again, boys are 3 out of 4 cases of autism that are happening now are happening in boys, which is very telling about things that are happening in the brain. So those folks that say you can just take some hormones and you can have a surgery and change into the other gender, clearly something's going on here. The male brain and the female brain are very different. And the male brain in this case is being disproportionately affected by whatever these toxins are. So that our state health agencies, they don't say much about autism. So if you look at the Department of Health in Oklahoma, they describe what autism is and they encourage screening, but they don't talk about rates of autism in Oklahoma, causes, or any kind of treatment or help there. Now, if you look at the Department of Health, they're currently receiving $116 million from the CDC to promote immunization and vaccines for children. So you're going to hear a lot about how your kids need their vaccines, and then another $44 million to address health equity. So you're going to hear a lot about health equity, which leaves people saying, what the heck is that? So you look at where they're getting their funds, and you look at their website, and you look at their priorities, and their priorities are completely aligned to what the old CDC was giving them money to focus on. They're not aligned to the epidemics that are disproportionately affecting Oklahomans. We talked about the alpha-gal syndrome and how Oklahoma is the epicenter for that tick-borne illness that causes allergy to all mammalian products, all meats, all dairy, all of those things. Oklahoma's off the charts on that. They don't mention that either. Oklahoma's very high in autism, and our government's virtually silent about it. Okay, so if we go to, because autism kind of goes between the mental health world and the health world. If we go to the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, they do say that 1 in 36 children in the US are on the autism spectrum. We know now it's 1 in 31. And they talk about the risks of that as these children grow up. They talk about 7 times more likely to attempt suicide. They talk about all these negative effects from it, but they don't really talk about anything happening in Oklahoma, what we're going to do about it, or where it's coming from, or where a prospective parent might be able to take steps to prevent it. Okay. Yeah. So now, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, with all your research, like in that, and with these numbers and this kind of explosion, how is the medical side kind of justifying this escalation in the number? I mean, is it just, are they saying, hey, we've got better diagnosis than in 1990, or, did you come across anything like that where they're trying to justify these numbers going up?
Oh, yes. You heard it even in that press conference coming from the press pool. Immediately, a reporter tried to preface a question by saying our diagnosis and the spectrum is much wider, and you even said it's a spectrum, and aren't we just catching more cases? To which the administration, the Trump administration, definitely shut that down and gave some solid evidence to why this is a rising epidemic. But the other thing that you see is the overlaying of this narrative, this progressive narrative. If you think about how we must accept and affirm everything as far as people's lifestyles, they're now taking that and layering it on autism, which is crazy. So if you look at our Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, they work with NGOs like the Autism Foundation of Oklahoma, AFO, right? And when we look at what AFO is pushing, what their narrative is, that they're saying that on their website, you can see things here, that we must accept and sort of affirm, in a quote, not to fix autistic people afflicted with autism, but to champion their right to live authentically. You will hear them say that these are neurodivergent people. Their brains just work differently. They're not damaged. We can't talk about this. And that's a really scary thing. If you know a family that has a profoundly autistic child and the challenges that come with it, they would do anything to undo the damage that's been done to their child's brain. But with this message, you are deemed as non-compassionate if you recognize and try to seek the source of the problem. Recurring pattern. Here's one from Lisa. Here's a thought. I come from an area of great racial diversity. When we moved to Oklahoma, we noticed a huge difference in people of color compared to what we experienced in California, fewer in Oklahoma. The MTHFR gene mutation is primarily present, responsible for VAX injury, and it occurs more often in Caucasians. I see a correlation. Could we have a higher rate of VAX injury due to simply having a higher Caucasian population? I mean, that's a really good question. I interviewed a mom, and we'll see this at the end of the article, and she sort of asked the same question. Is there a genetic weakness in some folks that makes them more susceptible to whatever these toxins are that are causing this epidemic? But as Robert Kennedy said, genetics can't cause an epidemic. Genetics are static.
Yeah.
And even if there's a weakness genetically, there has to be a toxin that comes in that causes this massive increase in a small period of time. So for some reason, there are people that don't want us to think of it as an epidemic. So the AFO, you can read some of this in the article, but their communication specialists put out something in response to the new CDC data and what Kennedy had to say in the spring about it, pushing back, quote, she said, pushing back against rhetoric that treats autistic lives as less than. And the truth is, no one here is treating an autistic person as less than. They're fighting for them. But you can read this press release, and it really tells you how we are very divided as this information comes out about digging into solid science, seeing what's going on, finding causes and finding treatments, and we're not going to even accept that there's something causing this. So financially speaking, the AFO, Autism Foundation of Oklahoma, gets 64% of its funding, again, from taxpayer-funded grants and additional things from the energy industry, which is kind of interesting. So I think a lot of their narrative flows through their funding. Here's a little pushback that was online after the communications person from AFO sort of called out people and said, let's accept these people and let's call them neurodivergent. Let's not fight for cures. This person said, it's not Autism Awareness Month, it's Autism Acceptance Month, with kind of a face. That's the narrative that, and he said, all right, fine, calling on all those who manufacture and administer vaccines to accept you are causing autism. There's quite a battle online about how we're going to think about this. The other thing I really want to share is that Trump got up into and talked about how we haven't listened to the voices of parents. And for 30 years, many parents have been saying, not just in utero with this Tylenol thing that we'll talk about, but have been saying, I know my child was functioning normally, and then something happened. He stopped talking. She suddenly had all kinds of behaviors that were hard to control. They saw it happening, and they so often related it to the shots. And I don't know if you remember this, but in 2014, do you remember the Hear This Well campaign?
Mm-mm.
So you all can watch this, and it's not very long. We won't play it here, but there was a journalist, sort of a talking head in the news, who said to the camera, I'm so sick of hearing about this and parents saying this. Hear this well. Vaccines don't cause autism, is what she said into the camera. So the tens of thousands of parents who were being silenced about what they knew about their children put together videos and started putting them out there. And this is a compilation of all of them kicking back and saying, hear this well. This is my experience. And yes, they do. So we clearly have this huge group of parents who are directly affected who absolutely believe the vaccines contribute to autism. Yeah. It's sort of our national narrative here. Don't talk about it, and I know what's happening with my child.
Well, and you know, when you think about a 12-month-old or an 18-month-old baby, that mom literally knows every little incantation and innuendo. I mean, everything that has to do with that child. So the second that something is off, that mother knows. I don't care, you know, what kind of economic condition or status that parent is in. They know when something is wrong with that child. And it's not just coincidence that a lot of these kids get shots and then all of a sudden the next day, mom's like, hey, there's something majorly wrong here. And I'll tell you, like, you know, my kids are not vaccinated, but it's not because I was some, you know, like guru on vaccines and all that. When my oldest was at like 18 months, we were going to do his vaccine. So, you know, we didn't know back then as early parents. Well, my daughter, she was they're 6 months apart. So my daughter was going to get her 1 year, and we went in there, she got her shots. And I'm telling you, Katy, whatever those shots were, just immediately affected her. I mean, we could just see it. We could just see the color change, her personality, just everything changed in her just like that. And I just said, that's it. We're not doing any more shots, period. I mean, luckily, I don't think she was damaged, but we could tell, you know, over a period of days that, you know, she was highly affected. You know, she had super high fever. And at that point, we just stopped. So none of the rest of my kids ever did anything. We don't do any over-the-counter drugs, no prescriptions, no. I mean, everything for us is one, because of that one incident. That's what set us kind of on this path with our kids.
Wow. And what's interesting is, I will tell you, having a house full of kids myself, grown now, my OB, which I trusted her, who delivered all of my children, and she was a family practice doctor, so we kept going to her, and she was their pediatrician and she was my obstetrician. We had great trust in her, and I know that she gave us this advice because she believed it to be correct and healthy. But she would say to me, make sure when you come back for the next visit that you have children's Tylenol in your diaper bag, because he's going to have that shot that really gives him a hard time. And if we can give it the Tylenol 15 minutes before, you'll probably have a better night's sleep tonight in the Smith household. So they were actually giving the Tylenol, recommending it to these tiny babies with the shots. So it is very hard to unwrap this. So let me go on a little bit and say here, the CDC has consistently said in the past, we've tested all this, we've done the studies, vaccines can't possibly be causing any of this. But the truth that people need to know, and there are links in the article, that they've only done testing on a few select individual vaccines and ingredients. So there was thimerosal, which is the part that contains mercury that was in a lot of the vaccines. And they did some separate testing of how much of that was in certain vaccines. They never did the testing about the cumulative effect of the buildup of that mercury. But the public outcry was so big that they eventually said, okay, we're going to take that out. Even though we're saying it's not causing a problem, we're taking that out. But what they did was they replaced that heavy metal with aluminum. And it's sort of this, they consider it a necessary component in stabilizing, doing things with these vaccines. But we don't know what the aluminum is doing. And it's also considered a neurotoxin that has replaced now this mercury. So people should know, never was a study done that said, here's the growing vaccine schedule. Here could be the buildup over time of heavy metals. And here is looking at, and we'll look a little more about the number of vaccine injections, just injections from 1986 to 2017. They were getting 11 injections. Then there were up to 54 just from 86 to 2017. And then we look at childhood chronic illness and developmental disabilities prevalence. In that time frame, it went from about 13% to 54%. It follows almost exactly with the number of injections kids are getting. So we have this Tylenol conversation, which frankly, I didn't see coming until pretty recent years. And we have this huge vaccine conversation that was hinted at in the press conference, but there's a lot more coming. So the Academy, I just wanted to talk about the powers that be. And let me get this comment real quick. My grandniece was a very bright child, on target developmentally. Immediately after one of her shots, she became very ill. Once she was better, she had lost the ability to speak and most of the progress she had made. Now she's severely autistic. Wow. How could you not see that caused? And that is what, Gracie, that's what tens of thousands of parents have been saying for decades. And how could our government ignore that kind of evidence from a parent? Lisa says doctors and nurses don't actually know much about what's in those vaccines. That's a great point. We trust our doctors, but we have to trust their entire medical training, which we know is pharma captured at medical schools now. They know when to give them, she says, and where to give them, all learned in just a half day of class. I've asked several RN friends of mine. They all say they knew far less than mothers did and just followed orders.
Yeah. And that's what we see. We see that follow orders type of situation with COVID, how obvious that was. But also, I would be highly interested, and I don't think I'm out of line here, but I bet you, Katy, that a lot of these doctors or clinics or hospital systems or, whatever the business side is, I bet you they get compensated pretty well for the amount of kids that are vaccinated within their practice in one way or another. It wouldn't surprise me in the least, because that's how those pharmaceutical companies work. They incentivize you to distribute their products in one way or another. So it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see that some of these doctors really make a lot of money just giving these shots to kids.
One actually told me they have a quota.
A quota, really?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow.
And that's been going on for years. So that's the relationship between pharma and providers, right? So I do want to talk about the American Academy of Pediatrics, because as you and I were you're still raising your kids. As we were raising kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics was assumed to be where you would go as a parent for what is the gold standard in making health decisions for your child. The truth is, it's become a very powerful lobbying union for providers. And they have been on a very specific campaign pushing back about the narrative that vaccines might be causing problems. They have public service things. They get young doctors to do these videos to ensure parents that vaccines are very safe and you're endangering your child if you veer from the vaccine schedule. So there are big, big money, and you'll see almost shaming videos for you considering not vaccinating from these young doctors, right?
Well, let me give you just a perfect personal example. My wife, she used to be on all the social media, all the stuff, and she was constantly, like after that happened with our daughter, she's like, hey, we're not doing any more vaccines. She was telling all her friends and everybody about she had to literally cancel her Facebook just because of the vaccine issue, because she was getting attacked. I mean,
Wow.
literally getting attacked by hundreds of people a day. That was just like, you don't know what you're talking about, just going crazy. And we're like, yeah, our daughter's sitting here. We know what we're talking about. We can look at her. We know that that's what happened. And I mean, for years, we're just attacked. Like some of her best friends, literally, they just quit being friends because they're just like, you're so crazy. It's unbelievable how people, that herd mentality will treat you in that aspect.
Well, for those of you who may be younger, who have young kids at home, you're not going to remember that a woman named Jenni McCarthy, she was actually on MTV, and she did the spring break things on MTV, and she was this very famous figure. Well, her son, she very much believes and this was early, ended up being damaged and having severe autism after having shots. And she fought that publicly. And they came after her with one of the nastiest PR campaigns you can imagine to silence her. And she would not be silenced. So this has been going on a long time. They did not want parents to get that message out. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, there's some information in here about how they're funded. And just in 1 year here, we see $64 million just to that one NGO from the Department of Health and Human Services, the CDC branch. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has basically been a PR voice for the CDC, who wants to deny vaccine injuries. Okay, Sarah says, insurance companies give bonuses based on the percentage of pediatric patients completely vaccinated in the doctor's office.
Wow, imagine
that. Oklahoma Medicaid gives extra payments called value added incentives for the same. So thank you, Sarah. So there's this multi-layered incentive program for people to adhere to that CDC child vaccination schedule, no matter what. Gracie says, I've read that there's a quota and you can make even more if you go over that quota. I was told that by a provider, Gracie. Lisa says, Michael, most insurance companies give bonuses of about $200 to $500 per child to pediatricians for fully vaccinating.
Wow.
If doctors don't meet that quota, the insurance company will drop them. To avoid that, pediatricians simply cut from their practice those who choose to not vax. It happened to us. We were literally kicked out of a practice for that one reason only. Wow. I have not heard that happening. You lose your pediatrician if you ask too many questions about vaccination. This is a conversation that's been building a long time. Now, at the end of this article, I interviewed a mom who has a son in his 20s who has autism, and you can read this. It's a really heartfelt story from a family has done so much for their child and took every step to push for diagnosis, didn't take no for an answer, made sure he got the services that he needed. But she says in the article, it was his 18-month shots. We saw it. It's still controversial, but we know that at his 18-month shots, everything changed. So I thank Claudia, who gave us this interview about her amazing son, Evan, and I encourage you to read that. But now I do want to go on to, let me change this a little bit and talk to you about hang on one second here. Let's remove this and let's add something else to the stage. Here we go. Give me just a minute. Share screen. So where is it? Here it is. What RFK did in that April timeframe, April and May, is he announced that there would be 13 research grants through the NIH. They were going to get to the bottom of what's causing autism, and they were going to look at all kinds of modalities. He said nothing was off the table. So they gave 13 research grants on autism prevalence, causes, treatment, which we haven't talked about much, and data integration, which is how we got to this current press conference that we had on Monday. So this right here is one of Robert F. Kennedy talked about several institutions that got these grants, one being Harvard. He talked about the University of California, got one of them, and that they all started to work. Now, what I'm going to tell you is none of this is new research. It had all already been done. So in this particular study that came to find a strong correlation between the use of Tylenol and a child's risk of autism, what they did, and you can go, so this is Harvard's announcement of that, which was just in August, based on this. You can go to the actual study. So here's the actual study. Oh, I guess it won't let me do that. Hang on. I can go from this. Hang on. Here it is. If I do that, it will. Yeah. No, it won't. I got to end this. You can go to the actual study, and I'm going to get us there, and walk through the methodology about how they got there. What they did was they took, share screen, hang on, I'm going to get this up there and I'm going to get it right, but I want it on this one that says evaluation. Here it is. So this is the actual study through Harvard in conjunction with Mount Sinai. And what they did in this is they went on to PubMed. So that's where all the studies are that they're published. This is a government website. And they pulled everything that had to do with acetaminophen use and ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, autism, and other neurodegenerative disorders. It was all based, their particular study was all in utero. What did mom use while she was pregnant? What did the baby as a fetus experience while they were pregnant? And they pulled all of these together, and I've gone through this in detail. They threw out things that had too much bias. They looked at things that might have contributing factors, like maybe mom was involved in some other kind of drugs in this study, and that's what they were studying. And they came down to 20 things that were already out there. All of this research had been done on the use of acetaminophen in pregnancy and ADHD. So 20 of those studies are about ADHD. Then 8 of those studies that they retained were on autism and autism spectrum disorder and acetaminophen use in pregnancy. And then 18 of them were on these other neurodegenerative disorders and mom's use of acetaminophen during pregnancy. Now, I'm going to tell you, there is a correlation. I was shocked. I didn't see this coming. I thought it would be more about vaccines, but there's a pretty strong correlation between strength of evidence in moms using Tylenol or acetaminophen during pregnancy and these disorders. For instance, just on the 8 that they considered the most valid studies, and they involved tens of thousands of women, there was a high strength of evidence, which a 1.17. So if you're thinking of 1.0 is 100%, and the strength of evidence in these studies, this was a very high strength of evidence. And the study also had a very low bias score, meaning other things are getting in the way. It was a very strong correlation between the use of Tylenol during pregnancy and autism. So I understand during that press conference how many times do you think Trump repeated, just don't take it, only take it if you need it? It was many times. So I think that is definitely something that they needed to get out there now, even though they don't have every answer. So I encourage people, go to this study, because if you go to the conclusions on this study, it says, our analysis using the navigation guide and the evidence here consist with an association between acetaminophen exposure during pregnancy and increased incidence of all of these neurodegenerative diseases. Appropriate and immediate steps should be taken to advise pregnant women to limit acetaminophen consumption to protect their offspring. So we have one answer. I'm not saying this is the only answer, but we have one answer.
Well, I mean, what's acetaminophen do? It literally affects your glutathione pathway, and in your glutathione pathway is what basically it feeds your blood-brain barrier. I mean, and your blood-brain barrier is there to keep all those chemicals out of your brain. I mean, your brain is electrochemical. So that, and like you said before, Katie, just kind of hit me. Think about all those doctors giving the vaccines to the kids and then telling the parents, give them some Tylenol. So not only, you've got the whole pregnant side, but you're giving a kid Tylenol on top of a massive chemical assault. That Tylenol is going right in, or acetaminophen, if you're, buying off brand, whatever, you're giving that's affecting their blood-brain barrier. It's lowering the defense of your blood-brain barrier. And what are all these conditions? These are all, neurological conditions in the brain. Those chemicals get in there and they can't get out. And I'll tell you, they can't get out because of there's a pathway, a pathway in your brain to specifically get rid of chemicals and things like that happen to get through your blood-brain barrier, which is the hepatic glutathione pathway. It goes from your brain into your liver. Well, when you take Tylenol and things like that, it blocks that pathway. So your brain is not actually able to get rid, or your body's not actually able to get rid of those things. So you do get that accumulation in your brain. And I met a doctor one time. She's out in California, and she created like the California College for Natural Medicine, or so. Her name's Dr. Teresa Dale. And I brought her up here just because I was thinking about her last night. But she actually, if you're interested, she created a specific detox that specifically targets that hepatic glutathione pathway in your brain. And she's helped reverse, not completely reverse over time, but she's helped reverse a lot of autism. She's been able to kind of bring down a lot of those things in one way or another. But I agree. I mean, it all adds up. I mean, it's so common sense. You've got a over-the-counter drug that affects the way that your body's protection works in the brain. And then you've just got this chemical assault that goes right in there, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Isn't it amazing how we're just starting to, even as we talk, we're starting to put the pieces together about how these things work at a cellular level. And that's exactly what you just described. Which the encouraging part is, I do want to talk about this. This goes exactly with what you're saying. So they talked about in the press conference, leucovorin, and this is a prescription medication that they're now immediately making available to parents who have an autistic child. And it goes along the same pathway. So leucovorin, folinic acid, like we heard a lot about folates and folate-based medicines and the need for folate during pregnancy. Folate is basically vitamin B9 is what it is. And they believe that in the brains of many of these kids that have been diagnosed with autism, that the folate metabolism is off. It can't get to the brain, exactly what you were talking about. And this particular drug, in the simplest of terms, provides a back door. It goes around those blockages, and it's able to bring this substance to the brain that's so vitally needed in autistic children. They're making this immediately available by prescription, and we heard that in the press conference. This is the first really big breakthrough that we've heard publicly available for parents who are supposed to just affirm and accept their children who are damaged by some of these things. And it has huge results associated with it. Specifically, I liked this particular website. I did some research about this. The benefits, especially improvements in speech, which folks who believe that their child was vaccine injured and became autistic after words developed. So there's a lot of people at like the 18-month mark. When your kid, some kids are saying sentences at 18 months. Some are just saying words. Some are far more beyond that, and then they regressed. They're seeing with this drug that it's improving and bringing back that speech and those speech pathways. And it's where was it? 50 to 70% of children with autism are believed to have folate receptor antibodies. This blockage can especially impact speech and cognitive development. Wow. So this is huge. There's already a lot of research in the background about dosages, different studies about how this is applied most effectively, and it's immediately available to these families. So if anything came out of that press conference that is a thank you God for moving this forward, I believe it's this drug. So we may be seeing some huge. Lisa says there are also detox protocols. If you have a vaccine-injured family member, do not lose hope. Yes, there are, Lisa. My family employed some of those during the COVID. I extended family members who employed some of those things because of COVID vaccine injury. So let's take a look now, because, just like your audience, the Tylenol thing, yes, that was a good association we didn't know before. Again, everything that came out was in utero, and we haven't looked at the Tylenol given to small children and what effect that would have. But I think it bears a need to take a look again at the vaccine schedule. So let's take a look at that evidence. Hang on, let me get this up here. So we have, I've got way too many things open. Just telling you, when I start with the research, we're in trouble. Okay, so I'm going to make this as big as possible, just so that we understand. And you remember in the article where we had the graph of how autism was going up in Oklahoma and across the country, and the timeline of that graph. So this is essentially telling us, and this again is from the Children's Health Defense Organization. That was Robert Kennedy Jr.'s association by which he fought pharmaceutical companies for many decades, and also chemical companies that dump things into rivers, all kinds of things. A lot of information about the increase in chronic childhood diseases. But in 1986, we were looking at 12 shots. So that's all over here. If you can see my cursor on the left-hand side, kids were getting 12 shots in 1986. And that was 25 different antigens, because we did already have some combined vaccines. We had like the DPT, and they treated 8 different diseases. Then by the time we get to 2019, so as you said, Michael, this is before COVID. This is before a whole new wave of, this is before we were talking about mRNA vaccines. That went from 12 to 54 shots, 25 antigens to 70 antigens. And the crazy thing is, double the number of diseases from 8 to 16.
Wow.
But why do we need 3 times as many antigens and 4 times as many shots to treat double the number of diseases?
Yeah.
So the number of shots per disease went through the roof. And you can see all of these shots that were added. You know, chickenpox was added in there. There were brand new things. There were additional doses. Things that weren't given in a series before are now giving 2 and 3 times during a child's life. So there's that. But then also, hang on, I want to, let's see, stop share. I also want to look at the current, because that was up until 2019. And I want to, wait, I don't think I'm doing that right. Nope, I got the wrong thing. Hang on one second. Where's my producer? What I'm looking for is, hang on, I'll get it. CDC, the child, I want the current childhood. Here it is. So this is the current childhood vaccine schedule. That's from the CDC. It is so large that we need to scroll down to explore this. Now we've added the hepatitis B shot, which is, they discussed that in the press conference. That's given when a child is literally hours old.
Yeah.
And it's for hepatitis B, which can really only be contracted realistically through intravenous drug use or sexual contact. They can test mothers for this and decide if it's needed. Trump said, let's not give it till 12 years old, and then the parent makes the decision, right? But if you look at this, this is just through 15 months what we're giving these children. And in a lot of these places, you'll notice there are little notes, see notes about the COVID-19 vaccine. So they're going to recommend it, even though now it's no longer on emergency status. So it doesn't have the protection. They're still going to recommend it. And then we get down to where kids used to be completely done with vaccines. You can see here, we're going from 18 months all the way out to 17 and 18 years. And they've added just an entire wave throughout their lifetime of more shots.
Yeah, and if they could, they would just mandate us into boosters for 40 years.
You're correct. You're correct. That's exactly what would probably happen. And they have. And again, they haven't addressed Tylenol usage throughout this particular, once a child is born and moving through this schedule.
Thank you, government. Thank you, all the people that love humanity and want us to be so healthy and free and good and everything else. Thank you.
So we have a comment here from Lisa. Katie, those with the MTHFR gene mutation cannot tolerate folic acid. Interesting point, which is coincidentally what mothers are hounded to take during pregnancy. Folic acid is what we need, and it is available at any natural food store. So folic, she says folinic acid. It's not a drug. I have several bottles in my kitchen cupboard. Folate is available in many forms other than folic acid, which is specifically problematic for people who have that so-called mutant gene, as is the most common form of B12. So that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Different forms of these things.
Yeah, and remember, Katy, they started enriching all of the wheat products with folic acid, which folic acid itself is a problem for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
That's just nothing. They took the iodine out of things, and then they substituted bromine and all these other things in, and that's just another major. To me, that's on purpose. It's not. They didn't do that just because they thought it's better, or they've got all this science or whatever. To me, it's on purpose. These vaccines are on purpose. It's a chemical assault against us, and just on purpose, in my opinion.
It is, if not on purpose, it's hard to explain away as this evidence became available. And you go back at these combined studies that they just looked at, that we're finally saying out loud in this press conference. And they've had this information for a long time, that there's correlation between these things. And now you had talked about during the VAERS system, the vaccine adverse event system, we've somehow been suckered into lately setting down our common sense. And if you look at the VAERS system about the COVID vaccine, there's actually a graph you can do. That's a vertical graph. And it has, so all along one side is all the different shots ever given in the United States. And then as the bar graph jets out, it tells you the number of adverse events. And it is the most insane thing you've ever seen. There's tiny little blips, and then you hit COVID and it's flying across the page, right?
Yeah. Well,
but we're not supposed to make any causal reference from that. That was the public narrative. So this press conference sort of blew that out of the water. Trump said things like MMR. I've heard this over and over again, that's been identified. And he said, break it up. Don't give your kids these combined shots, especially not the MMR. So I think there are things that are coming that he's hinting to, that he's feeling a real responsibility not to hold back this information because people will be hurt in the meantime.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of that in this press conference.
Well, I'm just impatient when it comes to that stuff, because I don't want to just allow too much time to go on. Then something else happens. All that goes on the back burner. I just want to attack right now. Let's just shut it all down. Let's clarify what actually works, what doesn't work. Let's get it. I'm glad he actually did mention the mRNA or RFK. One of them kind of mentioned the mRNA stuff, slowing it down or whatever. But I mean, in my opinion, if we just kind of let it just kind of push it down the road, then it never gets, we never get the answers and the justice, I think, that we're seeking.
You're right. And that's sort of what he was saying. So Trump said several times, I know there are doctors behind me and they probably don't think I should be saying this, but he's being as transparent, more transparent than we've ever seen on this topic from any public official ever. So I think it's an indication that there's more to come. The big question that was left in my mind, I do want to get this. I see some comments here. Yes. By the way, roughly 50% of the population has that gene mutation that Lisa was talking about and do not realize it. 50%. I did not realize that. I had heard of that gene mutation, but that's huge. I didn't realize it until I got a blood clot and a simple blood test. Most folks have zero symptoms, but there are simple lifestyle changes that should be made that can increase your health. Wow, that is great information. And from Jenni in the background, my youngest son had a febrile seizure after we got home from taking his last MMR when he was like 6. And that is, if you go and watch that video that I showed you, where they were saying, hear me now, that these vaccines don't cause autism, the response from all of those mothers, you'll hear MMR in there multiple times. So the big question, Lisa says, I'm with you, Michael. How many kids need to be sickened before we say this is unacceptable, right? I was okay with a little outrage and a little free speech at that press conference. People were saying it was chaotic, but I think this is a very emotional topic. The question that kept coming back to me, Michael, is how did we get off of using the things we used to use and everyone was using Tylenol? And that coincides very much with that graph. It also coincides with the increase in the childhood vaccination schedule. And these things are much more wrapped up together than I had ever imagined. But if you go back in time, I do want to share this. There was a narrative in the 80s that said no longer use aspirin. So aspirin was used for over 3,500 years. We have things, ancient Greeks used the original form of aspirin, or the active ingredient. So aspirin actually originated from, in its non-synthetic form, from willow bark. And cultures have been using it for centuries for all kinds of things, including fever reduction, right? It's salicylic acid is what the active ingredient in it is. And Tylenol actually came around as a brand name in the 1950s. So this had been around a long, long time. It was the late 1800s when aspirin first came on. There was a chemist for Bayer aspirin chemist. His name was Felix Hoffman, and he is the one that first synthesized aspirin from sort of this holistic willow bark formula to our more modern formula of what aspirin is. But this gentleman who's on the screen, his name is Sir John Vane, and he worked for Squibb. So if you understand pharmaceutical companies,
I don't want to interrupt you. Keep going. I gotta take a real important call just for a couple minutes. I'll be right back.
Yep. So he worked for basically a pharmaceutical company, and he discovered that aspirin in the 1970s did work about aspirin for how we use it now for anti-inflammatory properties. You see people taking an 81 milligram aspirin to prevent heart attacks, those kind of things. So there was some changes in the formulation of aspirin during that time. I can't say this is how it happened, but immediately following that research, we had an epidemic of what's called Reye's syndrome. So just let me know in the comments if you remember Reye's syndrome and the Reye's syndrome scare, that's REYES, during the 1980s. So what happened is they associated, it began in December of 1980, this sort of epidemic of Reye's syndrome. And there were over 1,200 cases over a period of from 1997. In December of 1980, they tracked cases to 1997. And in total, there were 1,200 cases of this Reye's syndrome. And it was very serious. A third of the children that they identified with this died. It was following certain viral infections, and they associated it with the use of aspirin to treat those viral infections, which included things like the flu and chickenpox. So we had this Reye's syndrome epidemic. Lisa, I'm going to get this comment in here in just a sec. And parents were told no longer give your child aspirin for a fever. And what essentially started happening is a lot of people stopped giving aspirin to kids altogether. The replacement for that in the medical community was acetaminophen. So we saw this really sharp increase in acetaminophen use starting in the 1980s. And we also see that the vaccine schedule for kids started to grow. So these two things seem to be very intermixed. Here's the thing about Reye's syndrome and the reformulation of aspirin based on this gentleman's work on the screen. The cases, of those 1,200 cases, almost half of them happened in 1980. So there were like 555 cases they identified in 1980, right after this reformulation. And then the whole PR campaign to stop giving aspirin to kids happened. And those cases dropped sharply with only no more than like 36 in a year from then until 1997. So we saw the public information campaign. People stopped using aspirin. That blip of Reye's syndrome went away, but we never identified why it happened and what happened with aspirin. What was the reformulation? They just started pushing acetaminophen, saying that is the safe alternative. So when we look at what happened in the press conference and talking about this as a causal, it had a lot to do with the fact that we removed aspirin. Now, I'm not saying go give aspirin to your children. You need to look at the research, but I'm saying that was what happened in the 80s that took aspirin out of the mix, and they never gave us the answer to why we had that blip of Reye syndrome in 1980 with the reformulation of aspirin. We don't know what happened there. There were no answers. So let me get some of these comments in here. So Lisa says Tylenol, the painkiller hospitals trust most, so you can trust it too. Commercial that played constantly in the 80s. So that's exactly the point I'm making, Lisa. When aspirin was vilified for children, and I can't say whether that was justified or not, but Reye syndrome was the villain. It was, you don't want your child to die of Reye syndrome. And in some of these studies, up to 40% of the kids died. It directly affects the liver. It affects the brain. And then Tylenol came along with those campaigns, the brand you can trust. So, and we did. We trusted Tylenol explicitly. Lisa also says, Reye syndrome is still a labeled warning in aspirin-containing products. Scared us all to pieces in the 80s. It was even woven into soap opera stories. Correct. So that is why acetaminophen started, and our agencies pushed it, and the big pharma companies pushed it. I think it's worth looking at very quickly who owns Tylenol and what other brands they are associated with it with. So
yeah, who does own them now?
So they're owned by Kenvue, and they have been for a long time. I think since the 1950s, Tylenol was sold off to a company called Kenvue, Kenvue. And I'm going to show you from their website. This is the connection between big pharma, health, food. So they have lots of what they call iconic brands. We have Neutrogena, Zyrtec, Aveeno, Listerine. Some of the biggest household items are from Kenvue, and that includes Tylenol. So was Reye syndrome the result of a reformulation by pharma of aspirin? Was it an accident that was never recognized? Or was it a campaign to push people toward a more profitable product? Aspirin is dirt cheap. Tylenol was far more expensive. And they even talked in the press conferences about how acetaminophen isn't used everywhere because it's more expensive. So in a lot of our third world countries, they don't have access to it. And they may have lower rates of autism. That's going to be more of what we study. Okay, we have another comment here from Dana Mooney. I'll say it. Don't give Tylenol to your children. Adults should use with caution due to what it can do to the liver. Yep, there was. It was an interesting press conference. So much more to come. It remains to be seen if the Oklahoma agencies will be adopting what we heard in the press conference. If we will see campaigns rather than about health equity, but to make leucovorin immediately available to families affected by autism. That's something we should be rallying for from our local agencies. But that's where we are. Incredibly interesting press conference. It's some of the boldest open conversation we've heard from a previously taboo subject among the medical community.
Yeah, well, I will give them credit because, yeah, that's always been literally off the table. Not going to talk about it. Not going to make a correlation. Yep. Not even going to bring it up in any capacity. I mean, look at how many people. I mean, in the reality of the scope of the world, look how many people die because of what the government says and does and doesn't say and doesn't do. You know, in one way or another, whether it's, war, this entire pharma attack on us in every possible way. I mean, I just believe, Katy, that, we've been on this planet for a long time and we didn't have all these interventions, even just regular vaccines. We didn't have those. We didn't have all those issues. It's all generated. It's all like Hegelian dialectic. They create the problem because they have a solution in the meantime, no matter what it is, whether it's physical, social, whatever it may be, they create it, and whoever they is, I mean, who knows, but ultimately You know, I believe that if you put the correct things in your body will heal itself. I mean, I believe it to my core. And
I do
just
too.
all of this allopathic everything. And you got to go back and, you know, you look at the roots of the entire allopathic industry. It goes back to the Rockefellers and all just trying to sell more oil derived products into the system. They literally created and funded the, you know, the medical system the way that we know it today.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
Yes, and they actually drove all other holistic treatments outside of the country. You can't be licensed to do those things that are considered more natural. That's why you'll meet people who get a diagnosis of cancer and say, I'm not going to do the chemicals, and they have to go to Mexico to get those treatments, and those clinics are there. It also, a common theme here is the use of fear. You see it in the Rise syndrome thing. That was a very scary thing. I remember my own parents, I mean, throwing out the St. Joseph's Bear aspirin that was the go-to for a house full of kids when they got sick. A lot of fear in these things. We saw it in COVID. I mean, they scared people into taking an experimental vaccine, and the fear was very, very real. So it's hard to say. So there was a comment back here that I do want to, because this is part of the history as well, not just the reformulation of aspirin, and then we immediately get Rise syndrome, and then acetaminophen is the only answer. She's saying acetaminophen doesn't do squat for pain. And then there was the Tylenol poisoning issue in 1982. And that's how they vilified acetaminophen when the time came for it to be the bad guy. So let me tell you something about that. There are documents that are accessible in the Wayback Machine about a 1999 meeting that involved Anthony Fauci and the Childhood Vaccines Approval Board. I forget the exact name of that board. But at the time, there was a 7-person sitting board, and they were having the conversation. They're fighting the narrative that the vaccines are causing autism and other neurodegenerative diseases. And they're having this conversation. It's in the minutes, in the notes. And someone says, yes, we tested this vaccine and this one ingredient, but do we ever look at the cumulative effect of how much mercury is going into a kid's brain over the entire schedule? Right. And so someone says something to the effect of, we never ever did the 8th grade math on this. And as they started to pull this all together, they're pulling this together on this board, and it becomes very obvious that there's a toxic level of heavy metals by the time a child gets through this vaccine schedule. They have to vote about what they're going to do about it. And there were 3 scientists on the panel who were specifically saying, we need to be Tylenol. This is kind of a quote from the meeting, because Tylenol, when they had the poisoning issue, which ended up being kind of localized, pulled everything off the shelves and was completely transparent with the American public. We all knew about it. It was everywhere. This is happening. If you have Tylenol, don't take it. We're pulling it off the shelves. They took a massive financial hit, but they ended up coming back as one of the most trusted brands, because you knew if something went wrong, or you believed if something went wrong at that point, they would do something about it. That panel voted, and the 3 that wanted to be completely transparent with the American public about the buildup of mercury in a child's brain on the vaccine schedule were overridden by the other 4 who voted not to make that information public. That was 1999. And those documents have been stuffed, but you can get to them on the Wayback Machine. I've read them.
Yeah. And who are they to keep anything from the public?
Right.
You know, in reality, who are they to keep anything from us when they work for us?
Correct. And to make those kind of decisions that affect your family, and then run down the line, because if the CDC then comes out and the FDA, they come out and they give their recommendations to pediatricians. The American Academy of Pediatrics comes out and says, yes, this is what the studies of the government say. Your pediatrician believes it. You trust your pediatrician. I trusted mine. If I could go back, I would have made very different decisions.
Well, look at the food pyramid itself. I mean, give me a break. It's such. I just want to. I gotta be nice. I gotta be nice, because I could start cussing, even though I don't cuss anymore.
That's good. So Dana Mooney says, this tells you where OK news stations are, and she gives us a Facebook link, which is interesting. The pushback from this press conference on Monday has been that the usual suspects, the mainstream media, who's paid by the pharmaceutical companies, All of those folks are saying, this is crazy. This can't be. Trump saying things he can't prove. I encourage people to go to the studies of the 13 grants that were given in the spring to pull the existing data together to get rid of the junk and give us answers. Because if you do, it will change your mind about the validity of this. I believe now wholeheartedly that there's a causal link here.
Oh yeah. 100%.
And that it's absolutely, I always did know there would be some, but this one really is. That doesn't mean that they aren't going to get to what's coming with the vaccine schedule.
Yeah.
But I think that Mr. Kennedy was correct. We have a toxic soup here.
Yeah. Well, and another reason why boys are so much more adversely affected. Girls are like miracles. I mean, their bodies, they're so much tougher really than guys. Yeah, guys are strong and aggressive, but girls can literally take it. Their bodies, since they're built to give life and protect and do that. A girl's blood-brain barrier is so much stronger than a boy's. I mean, and that's just a scientific fact. That's not even like, oh, well, whatever, hearsay. Girls are so much tougher, internally than guys. And that's just another reason why you see all these boys that are so damaged, there's girls that are damaged, but the overwhelming majority is on the boy side. And that all goes right back to the blood-brain barrier and all the stuff that's going in their head, and it can't come out because their glutathione pathway is blocked. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like common sense. It's like not even that difficult to understand. Yes. You don't have to be a PhD, some kind of doctor, whatever, supposed doctor. You just got to think. You just got to use your brain and say, yeah, those things all kind of add up pretty easy.
It really does. I mean, I'm so thankful that we're starting to get answers. And to what you said, we know that a woman's body, while she's nursing a baby, a woman can become sick with a pathogen, and her body can actually protect her child while she's nursing from that same pathogen. It's an absolute miracle of the immune system of creation. So you're right. And it's 3 out of 4 boys now.
Yeah.
That are affected by autism. So Julia says governments exist to steal, kill, and destroy legally, of course, right?
Yeah, legally.
Everything on TV was sponsored by pharma during COVID years and beyond.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is, I've read quite a bit about the number of, and for those whose friends and family left their lives after refusing to vax back in the early 90s, how horrible would it be if we looked them up today and said, ha, I knew it. Too terrible, just a little terrible, asking for a friend who may be me. Yes. So just for being in the conversation, that this outlet was thrown off of some social media platforms.
Yeah.
Gracie says Tylenol plus vaccines plus all the garbage chemicals in our food, it can all only lead to poor health. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And Lisa says little boys of color, specifically Black boys, are harmed exponentially more and worse by the MMR than Caucasian girls and boys. It smacks of eugenics to me.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking about this as I was looking into this, and I'm hoping some of these back end studies that are happening now, looking at what we already know and admitting what we know is what's happening here. There are things about ethnicity, which leads to, genetic precursors and those kind of things. What I'd love to see is an overlay of the pressure for vaccines on some of those communities. Because, in our inner cities, it would seem like that we would have lesser vaccination. There's some evidence to say it's actually more. They roll around with vaccination vans. All this is federally funded. Those kids actually, now that we have healthcare coming into schools in the community schools model, a lot of these kids are fully vaccinated. So we may be looking at something that's not genetic. We don't know yet, but it'd be really interesting to find out when that data comes out about what the vulnerabilities are. Okay, do we have any other comments about this? I mean, this is definitely a subject we'll continue to cover because the information's, it was hidden for so long and now it's coming out of a fire hose.
Yeah. Well, and remember, Katie, I can't remember if it was in India or if it was in Africa, but there was, you have those UN medical groups that provide all those vaccines, for all those people. And remember all those girls that got sterilized, and I think it was in India. All those girls that were sterilized by basic vaccine, whatever it was, tetanus or whatever, where they spiked that vaccine with HCG. So that way, you know, and you have to have a woman produces that during pregnancy in order to maintain the pregnancy. So they spiked that, and all those girls were, you know, infertile because their own immune system, you know, when they became pregnant, their body attacked that HCG in one way or another. So, I mean, I don't put it past them in any capacity, Lisa. I know that they carry out eugenics in one way or another. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Right.
Even to the extent of reckless experimentation.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we do know that also in India, some tribal girls were killed when the Gates Foundation went in and was funding their research behind the HPV vaccine.
Oh, yeah.
Which we haven't even talked about that.
Yeah. Look at that massive push for years with Gardasil. I mean, for years and years. And I'll tell you, we never, you know, my daughter never got it. And there were parents that literally were like going ballistic on us. Like, your daughter can't spend the night at our house unless she has a vaccine. I mean, we literally heard parents tell us that. And we're just like, forget it. You're crazy.
Talk about not doing your research.
Yeah.
So for me, it was one of my watershed moments when I said I will no longer trust them. When I was with one of my sons, and it was time for whatever the junior high-ish booster or whatever was, and they said, we recommend the HPV vaccine. It was brand new. And I was like, really? Tell me about that. And it turns out, what she said to me, I had already done some research, so I think I knew. And she was saying, yes, it can help with some sexually transmitted diseases, and this is what causes this, and it can prevent some cancers. And I looked straight at her and said, I'm pretty sure my son's never going to get cervical cancer. By the way, so that's a big no. By the way, what does it cost? And the answer I got back was, well, on your insurance, it's only this much. And I was like, no. What would you charge my insurance? This is the very beginning, remember, new drug. $1,500 to vaccinate a boy for HPV to prevent cervical cancer. So the insanity started happening long ago. Wow.
Well, since you mentioned Jenny McCarthy earlier, I want to put this little clip up here. Okay. I don't know if you remember. You remember who she was dating at the time that was real big with her in that whole autism scene? Very, very outspoken. See if you remember it before I put this up here.
Well, she ended up marrying one of the, I can't remember the last name, brothers who are all actors. But I don't remember then who she was dating.
All right.
I'm sure it was something crazy because
watch this. Okay. And how this just completely disappeared. You know, like you said, with the whole campaign completely against her.
Oh, yes.
Julia got it, but watch this.
That's right.
What happened in 1990? There was no plague that was killing children, that we had to triple the amount of vaccines.
What happened after 1989?
Why did they
get more to 26 more vaccines?
Agreed.
Are all of them absolutely necessary?
They want to make money.
Of course.
It's twice as many as anywhere else in 30 countries in the Western world. But we give twice as many shots as any of those countries. Why is that?
Well, what are you against? Don't vaccinate for this, but vaccinate for that?
Yes.
I think we have to choose which ones are absolutely necessary.
You should educate yourself. We want to empower parents to educate themselves. Do we need to have the chickenpox? Do we need the hepatitis B shot on the second day of life?
I don't think we can afford to assume that the people who are charged with our public health any longer have our best interests at heart all the time. Parents have to make their own decisions, educated decisions. They have to look at the information.
Space out the vaccines, delay them till after one, clean out the toxins that are in them. We don't need that many.
Why would a doctor not want to know more about something that can save a life or prevent a disease? I don't
the AAP is financed by the drug companies. Medical schools are financed by the drug companies. This is a huge business. Vaccines are the largest growing division of the pharmaceutical industry. $13 billion.
They control medical schools.
What we're asking is for them to take a loss for the good of our children. That's a tough sell in a boardroom.
Yeah. Look at that. How about that?
Wow. Wise words. What now? Do you have a date on when that interview was?
I'll have to look it up.
Okay, it's really interesting because she was a champion. She was the original out front, very public mom with a vaccine injured child with autism, and I had forgotten that they were dating.
Yeah.
But
well, everything they both said in that is 100% accurate.
100% accurate
to today. You know,
and we are living right now with this administration in the White House in a period where we're going to learn how evil our government really became.
Well, so here's the most current VAERS database list. I use this all the time actually because when I write up like medical exemptions for other parents, that are scared to fill out the forms or whatever. I have for a long time, so I have a whole list of all 4 of the different exemptions that you can claim. I have a little paragraph on each one of those so people can just use whatever they want. But anyway, here's the database. So this is just this year. So through this year, and I want to bring up something real quick before I show this.
Okay.
Katie. Let's look at this right here. So remember that Harvard did a study on the VAERS database actual reporting. And in that study, this was a study they had like, I don't know, they had like 700,000 different vaccine people that they followed, over like 4 or 5 years, whatever it was. And in that study, they concluded, this is Harvard, they concluded that only 1% of the cases that actually go into VAERS, only 1% is reported. So you're literally looking at 100x any number that's even given in that database. So if we go back over to that database.
And that study, if I recall correctly, that was a really wide study. I think they used something like 26 hospital systems across the country. So think about a hospital system and how many providers are connected to the hospital system. And they went in and they used the medical coding through insurance, which is pretty accurate because you don't get paid for it unless it's in there, to track what vaccines people got and then what treatments for adverse effects they had after. So it's like one of the biggest studies we've ever seen on this.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the database, just the current list for 2025, there's been 20,228 total occurrences or incidents that's been reported to VAERS. So that's the entire country. In Oklahoma, there's been 183. So, and that's what I have highlighted here is just all the Oklahoma instances, and you can read it, moderate injection, site pain, no treatment, resolve field, it kind of gives a description of all these. But anyway, you take that and you multiply it by 100, that's 18,300 cases. That's 2,022,800 cases nationally. I mean, that lines up in my opinion. Maybe the 183 that's been reported is not really that big of a number here in Oklahoma, especially when we see your number of the increase or the concentration, how much higher the concentration is in Oklahoma. But you take, kind of that Harvard multiple in there, Katie. Okay. You've got 18,300 cases, actual cases in Oklahoma. Okay. That makes a little more sense. So
of someone being injured by that one
Yeah.
thing. Yes. No, correct. And that Harvard study, was incredibly thorough. Now, what happened with it after that, because the VAERS system was supposed to solve all this for us. We were going to track it. Yes, the government's going to keep you safe because we're going to be tracking all the adverse events from any vaccines. So we're going to be so on top of it that it doesn't matter that the pharma companies have immunity for what they do to you as long as it's on the childhood vaccination schedule.
Yeah.
But it was incredibly thorough. Now, what happened with it? Nothing.
Yeah.
It sat there and they did nothing about knowing, yikes, only 1% of these things. In the study, you learn that providers didn't even know about VAERS. People who treated people all day long had no idea that they had an obligation to this reporting system. So really interesting. Oh, you've got a book for us.
Well, I've got 3 books. I have all 3 of these books. I've read them all. And this kind of, everyone always goes back to, you know, when they're trying to justify vaccines, all the medical people, whatever, they're always like, oh, what about polio? You know, they got all this polio stuff. If you want to know anything about polio and the vaccines and the real causes, this book right here, The Moth and the Iron Lung, is unbelievable. The correlation between the polio vaccine, when it came out, the actual, you know, the disease was already literally going back in the other direction at that point in time. And that they said the vaccine is, you know, miraculously what stopped polio. That had literally nothing to do. And also in today's time, there's more people that get polio from the actual live polio virus vaccine. You can just look that up. That vaccine gives more people polio than there's just native polio out there. But this book basically shows the correlation of the very harsh agricultural chemicals that were being sprayed back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, DDT, those things, how those things were literally exactly the symptoms of polio, not just in people, but in animals and other things also. It is fantastic, fantastic book. Another book is Toxic Legacy, literally all about glyphosate. You know, glyphosate's another chemical that, you know, does it cross the blood-brain barrier like some of the stuff in the vaccines? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, glyphosate's more water soluble, so it may not actually cross, but glyphosate's literally in everything. I mean, it's in your spinal fluid. It's, you know, it's everywhere and everything in your body. That's just something else, you know, that we need to look at.
Sure. That's a great point. I expect that to come up in this conversation, as they say they're leaving no stone unturned in possible causal factors.
But if you just want like a handbook of disease and vaccines and the entire history, this book, I've watched many interviews with Suzanne Humphries, and she's just an unbelievable, doctor researcher. I mean, just unbelievable. She did a pretty big show on Joe Rogan maybe a year ago or so. But this book literally will go, you will get the entire history of all of that stuff, how bad it is, what they knew, why they did. I mean, it is just,
I haven't read that one.
Fantastic.
I will definitely be getting that one. So Jenni is saying that the Jenny McCarthy and Jim Carrey interview was in 2009. So that's the conversation was boldly out there by them 15 years ago. And we're just getting an administration that will say it out loud.
Yeah. And
then Lisa says, Michael, they say that about literally every disease. Quote, vaccines eradicated it.
Yeah. Total. And you can look like what Jim Carrey was saying in there, the vaccine side of all these pharmaceutical companies, that's how they make all of their money. Literally, those vaccines finance those drug companies like you can't even imagine. And that's literally the only thing that keeps a lot of them, you know, really going to the way, you know, to the degree that they are, is because they sell and literally force, in my opinion, so many vaccines just across the board. And if COVID wasn't the ultimate wake-up call of all of it, then shame on you for just believing the system.
I believe it was. I saw a poll the other day, a pretty sizable poll of young parents with young children, I should say, and only 47% said they were following the childhood vaccine schedule, which is a massive drop. It used to be that a kid who wasn't vaccinated that needed an exemption to get in school was like a unicorn. And now we have parents really thinking, and I think you're right. I think the COVID epidemic and the resulting vaccine is making young people really think about what they put in their kids. And I am so thankful for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Lisa says,
Lisa's awesome.
Yep, she is. She's a knowledgeable lady. If you want more info, please come to my house where I have an entire library of books on this topic and have been teaching it since 1997 in my childbirth classes. Please, I'll make snacks. It's that important. Lisa, I agree with you. It couldn't be more important. If we'd been having this conversation 20 years ago, we could have saved a generation of young families from the trials they're experiencing. And
you know, I'll give you another personal example with vaccines and my kids. When my youngest was born, so he was born in 2014, our doctor knew that we're 100% no vaccines, all the whole 9 yards. And I mean, literally said it 10 times, to all the nurses in there, hey, we don't want any vaccines. When you go put them on the table, all the stuff. So he's with us. He's getting all cleaned up. They take him down to the nursery. I just happened to walk down there, and they're giving him bath in there, and then they're going to bring him back. So I go ahead and just come back to talk to Lauren, because they're going to bring him back, in 5 minutes. So he comes back, and he had a little Band-Aid, on his thigh. So, I mean, I'm going ballistic. I'm like, what is going on? Well, some nurse gave him a vitamin K shot while he's back there. And I mean, I literally went ballistic when I was in there, and, they didn't know what to do, because no one probably ever reacted like that to them while they're in there. But I mean, I was literally almost to the point where I was literally going to sue them, because that was just, but they all knew. They took him back there, and they went and gave him a shot anyway. And they told me it was vitamin K. So who knows what they actually did to him, Katie.
So if it's right after they're born, it was probably either the vitamin K or the hepatitis B. Those are the only two on the schedule for in the hospital.
Yeah.
And now it looks like the hepatitis B is going to be put off based on that conference.
Yeah,
yes. Yeah. So we'll see what actually comes out. There's a difference between standing up at a press conference and saying you should delay this, and what the actual guidance to providers and hospitals is that's going out from the CDC. But the vitamin K, I haven't researched that. I know that that's a common, and it's not even sort of on the schedule. It's just something that they do because it is vitamin K. But I would have to look into that more to tell you about that. I don't know. Do you know much about the vitamin K? I know it has to do with protecting the blood vessels in the brain.
I don't know.
And vitamin K is something that's in broccoli and kale, right? That's an essential. But then again, you kind of want to know what form that's in, because just like the polio shot, I didn't know this until I read something recently by a lawyer who's really dug into this. There are 6 different polio shots now. If you say yes to your kid having a polio shot, do you know which one they're getting? There are 2 of them that are markedly more dangerous than the others. It's so complicated for young parents.
Yeah. Well, and just like what Lisa says there, I mean, I want to deliver these vitamins to my children the way that they're supposed to be, through whole food with the cofactors and all the other chemicals and things that nature has created for us to consume, to be able to actually assimilate those things. I don't need a needle piercing my son's skin and bypassing, his own protection in his body to give him a vitamin K.
It's a good point you make. If mom had access to great whole foods and leafy greens, and she's nursing your baby's getting vitamin K, right? Imagine that, the way God intended. We can't go with that plan. Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of ground, and great comments from everyone. Thank you so much. They're so knowledgeable, and that's part of this, is coming together to share all this information as it comes pouring out at us. Gracie, I was thinking Hep B, which no newborn needs, and I think that that was one thing that was said at the press conference. Common sense is what he said. A child doesn't need it. Lisa says dangerous since newborns are not, vitamin K she's referring to, because newborns are not supposed to clot. By the 8th day of life, babies have all the vitamin K they need. It is absolutely unnecessary, yet hospitals make it seem like your baby will have an immediate brain hemorrhage if they don't get it. Fear.
Yeah, fear. There you go.
Yep. Gracie, if mom was healthy, why would baby need it? Correct. Katie, that is exactly what it is. Anything but God's plan. Yeah. And we could spend more time talking about this, but
that's good versus evil.
It is.
I truly believe evil is in the government apparatus, and the government apparatus is public health.
Right.
And we're just at the mercy, just like we saw with COVID. We're at the mercy of these public health people that are unelected that literally just kill us, slow kill. It's literally just slow kill, in my opinion.
Giving us things we don't need. I mean, we didn't even talk about why they are across the board wiping antibiotics into a newborn infant's eyes for pathogens that they can very easily and non-intrusively test mom for before she gives birth and know that whether that child needs that or not to protect their eyesight development. But we're just doing it across the board, 100%.
Oh yeah. Well, and you gotta comment there also. Well, read that one, read the one before, because we did not talk about Dr. Judy Mikovits, who I think's unbelievable.
Okay, came in very late. Vaccine injury attorney here. Not sure if the expert Dr. Judy Mikovits has been mentioned.
No, we did not talk about.
No, we did not get that far. But oh goodness, maybe this should be ropes.
You want to talk about
Darlene Carroll? You may be invited by Jenny White soon to come on ropes and talk about what you know.
And you want to talk about a doctor who was literally only wanted to do everything right for people, for humanity, who was completely blackballed, completely blacklisted by Fauci and all his cronies.
Yes.
Dr. Mikovits was literally, she is the real deal in my opinion. I wish Trump would give her some high level position in the cabinet in one way or another. Mm-hmm. That way you can't ignore, you can't censor, you can't blacklist her.
Well, I think every one of those people that paid a huge, heavy professional price for standing up, I think what we're seeing coming out now is we're standing on their shoulders because they would not be silenced. And eventually this couldn't be held back.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Great discussion. We will continue to cover it. Again, I want to get back to Oklahoma. I would like to see our state agencies digging in and recognizing that this is a huge, huge struggle for Oklahoma families. She was arrested for trying to show the truth. Exactly. Lisa says, everyone reading this is welcome to DM me about vaccines, the MTHFR mutation, anything related to what we've discussed on this show. This is my area of expertise, not finances or politics, which we turn to Jenny, Katy, and Michael for. That's great, Lisa. I mean, if there's one thing we want to do is have people within the independent media spectrum who are willing to dig into these things, talking to each other. So everyone, Lisa O'Brien, she's on Facebook. If you want to direct message her and have any questions, she's a wealth of knowledge. Okay. All right, Michael.
All right.
Positive things. We're going to keep our praying hands crossed for this new treatment and for the families who've been so adversely affected.
Yeah. Well, and I hope that they can down the road, on top of that medication, but find something else that I just hate to always turn to allopathic everything. I hope that they can find something a little more holistic that can help detox and start reversing some of these effects that these kids have, because I do believe that there's going to be ways to heal these kids because they've been chemically damaged, and hopefully we can reverse that.
Well, at the press conference, they specifically talked about how our federal health agencies had been redirecting these research funds toward genetic causes only.
Yeah.
And now that we see the shift of this money and the real research and looking at the facts surrounding toxins, vaccines, pharmaceuticals, maybe we'll start to understand more about where the damage came in, and God willing, we'll heal some people. Okay. Well, I appreciate you. Appreciate everyone commenting. Jenny will be back, possibly even Friday. We'll see. Hopefully Friday. We hope she's feeling much better. And now on Friday, your topic for Friday. You have a guest for Friday, correct?
I don't know. I think so.
Yes. I want to tell you, actually. I think I know that, so I can tell everyone. Yes.
Hey.
Justin Hornbeck will be on on Friday. A candidate for the Corporation Commission. That's somebody that will be really interesting to talk to. There's some huge things happen there, and a great candidate. I love when I see a great candidate come in that will really have the people's interests in mind. So tune in on Friday for an interview with Justin Hornbeck.
Yeah. Sounds great. Got a couple more comments.
Okay, the Greek word pharmakeia appears in Galatians 5:20, says Julia, and Revelations 18:23. Terms for the same root word appear in Revelations 9:21 and 21:8 and 22:15. Interesting. I need to go check that out. Remember that all you need can be purchased at Sprouts or Natural Grocers or Whole Foods. No need to argue with the medical system that will dismiss your concerns. This is something even pro-vax parents can implement.
Yeah, good.
Great point. Great point. Clean
Thanks,
food.
Lisa. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right.